The smile in the frame. The funeral had ended hours ago, but the living room was still thick with the scent of incense and fading lilies. The air was heavy, not just with smoke, but with unspoken sorrow. A framed photo of Grandmama sat on the altar, surrounded by candles that flickered in the dim light. The picture had been taken just a week before she passed. In it, Grandma looked serene. Her expression was neutral, serious, almost stern, as she always had been in life. That was the photo the family had chosen for her funeral. It had felt right, fitting. Too, her 16-year-old granddaughter stood in front of the altar, eyes locked on the image. She looked softer, to whispered. Her mother, Aunt Lean, glanced over. "What? In the photo, she looks different from before. Is it just the lighting?" To asked. Aunt Lean gave the picture a brief look. "Same as always, you're just tired." To nodded but didn't look convinced. She'd stared at the photo for hours during the funeral, and she remembered it clearly. Grandma hadn't been smiling, but now there was something there. Not a full smile, but the corners of her mouth were just barely upturned, subtle, almost invisible. But it was there. That night, Tu couldn't sleep. The room felt colder than usual, though the fan wasn't on. Her bedsheets clung to her legs with a dampness that wasn't just from sweat. The shadows on her ceiling seemed to move with their own rhythm, shifting every time she blinked. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Vi, you okay?" That funeral looked intense. Tu hesitated, then typed. "The photo on the altar, I think it changed." "Vi, changed how? Like, haunted changed?" Tu stared at her screen for a moment, then deleted her reply. It sounded ridiculous, even to her. The next morning, she went back to the living room. The altar remained untouched, but the something about it pulled her in again. She gasped. Grandmama was smiling. A real, unmistakable smile. Gentle, not wide, not out of place, but undeniably there. Tu stepped back. "Mom, come here." Her mother rushed in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's wrong?" "The photo, look." Her mom glanced at it, then frowned. "It's the same." "No, it's not. She wasn't smiling yesterday." Her mom exhaled, walked up to the frame, and tilted it slightly. "See? The glare from the window makes it look like she's smiling." Tu didn't argue further, but her stomach twisted. She'd seen it clearly. Over the next few days, more guests came to offer incense and their respects. Each time to pass the altar, she looked at the photo. And each day, Grandma's smile grew. By day 4, the expression was warm, comforting. Her eyes even seemed brighter. "Maybe this is a sign," her Uncle Tuong said one evening, "that she's happy in the afterlife." Everyone agreed. "She's letting us know she's at peace," said Aunt Lean. But Tu wasn't comforted, because on day 5, the smile looked too wide. Not joyful, almost forced. The kind of grin someone gives when they're pretending. And her eyes, they weren't just brighter. They were staring directly at Tu, like the photo knew she was watching. That night, Tu couldn't hold it in anymore. She messaged Vi again. "I swear the photo's changing. It's like she's watching me. I don't know what to do." Vi, "Okay, wait, seriously. This isn't a joke." "No joke." "Vi, you need to send me a pic. Let me see." Tu crept back to the altar. The candles had all burned low. Only the faint yellow of the hallway light lit the photo now. She raised her phone, snapped a picture, and sent it to Vi. The reply came quickly. "Vi, okay. Why is she smiling like that? That's creepy." Tu's heart pounded. So she wasn't imagining it. On the seventh day, during the Levada traditional final send-off ceremony, more strange things happened. As the monks chanted, one of the candles flickered wildly, then blew out on its own. Aunt Lean tried to relight it, but the wick refused to catch. It was like the flame didn't want to return. The incense curled unnaturally, floating downward instead of up. The photo remained where it was, but now the smile looked wrong, sharp, almost smug. Tu felt sick. After the ceremony, she found her younger cousin, Ben, standing in front of the altar, whispering. "What are you doing?" she asked. Ben turned to her, talking to Grandma. Tu knelt beside him. What did she say? She said not to let them take her picture down. Tu froze. What? She said she's not ready to leave, that she still has things to finish. Ben, when did she say that? She told me just now, in my ear. Didn't you hear her? That night, Tu dreamed of the funeral photo. Except it wasn't a dream. She stood in the living room, and the frame was hugged, towering over her like a mirror. Grandma Mai's face filled it entirely. Her eyes opened wide, and her smile split ear to ear. "You see me now, don't you?" the photo whispered. Tu woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding like a drum. Her mom burst in. "Tu, what happened?" Tu could barely breathe. She talked to me, in the photo. Her mom held her tightly. "It's just a nightmare, sweetie, just a nightmare." But when they got up the next morning, the picture frame had fallen face down on the altar, and behind the glass, where the photo should have been, was only an empty white sheet of paper. They searched the house for the missing photo, but it was gone. No one had touched the frame, and the glass hadn't been broken. Tu didn't tell them what she feared, that Grandma had left the picture, that she was out. That night, Ben cried in his sleep. When they checked on him, he whispered, "She's walking in the hallway." They thought it was just a child's nightmare, until to check the security camera her dad had installed for safety. The footage from 3:47 a.m. showed a shadow moving down the hallway, a tall, thin woman in a traditional white funeral dress. Her face was blurry but unmistakably familiar, and she smiled at the camera. That morning, they called in a monk to bless the house. The monk lit incense, walked through every room, and stopped at the altar. "She is not at rest," he said simply. "You must not keep her image. She is still attached." But the photo disappeared on its own, Tu said. The monk looked at her with calm, serious eyes. Then she chose to leave it. "You must guide her spirit to peace, or she will remain among you halfway between worlds." Tu nodded, but in her heart, she wondered, what if Grandma didn't want peace? What if she wanted something else? That night, to return to the altar alone, she knelt down, lit a single candle, and whispered, "Grandma, I miss you, but you're scaring us. Why are you still here?" Silence. Then, the flame flickered sideways toward the hallway, to turn slowly, and at the far end, just past the flickering shadows, stood a figure, smiling, eyes that follow. The hallway stretched out in silence. The figure at the far end remained still, her white-out eye fluttering gently as if caught in an unseen breeze. Though the shadows made her face indistinct, the shape of the smile was unmistakable, thin, patient, and eerily familiar. Tu blinked. The figure was gone. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she backed away from the altar. The candle sputtered once, then went out on its own, leaving her in half-darkness. She didn't dare move for several minutes, her breathing shallow, ears straining to catch any sound beyond the hum of the old ceiling fan. Finally, She bolted back to her room, locked the door, and pulled the blanket over her head like a child fending off nightmares. But she didn't sleep, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face again, watching, waiting. The next morning, she found Ben in the kitchen, clutching a drawing. "Did you dream again?" she asked. He nodded solemnly and handed her the paper. Crayon lines scratched across it, black and red mostly, with a tall woman drawn in the middle of a hallway. Her eyes were large, empty circles, and a crooked smile stretched across her face. Above her head were tiny, floating pictures of their family, all crossed out in red. Tu's throat tightened. "What do these mean?" "She said she's watching everyone," Ben whispered, "to see who remembers her and who doesn't." "Ben, who told you that?" He looked up at her with wide eyes. "Grandma, from the mirror." Later that day, to check the living room, the photo was still missing. The frame was empty, glass unbroken, as if nothing had ever been inside. She stared at it, hoping for some sign, hoping maybe her imagination had taken over. That stress was twisting her mind, but when she turned to leave, she froze. One of the other photos on the wall, a family portrait from Lunar New Year, was different. In the far back, behind everyone else, stood a faint figure, one that hadn't been there before. A woman in white, smiling. Tu took it down, examined it closely. The quality looked natural, unedited. If it was a prank, it was perfect. She rushed to show her mom. "Mom, look at this, seriously. Look behind Uncle Tuong." Her mom squinted, frowned. "That's just a shadow. Maybe a guest we don't remember?" "No, she wasn't in the original. I swear she wasn't." To her mom's side, "You've been very emotional since the funeral. I think your mind's playing tricks." But Tu wasn't convinced, because that same night, when she checked again, the woman had moved. She was no longer at the back of the group. She was closer, behind Tu. That evening, Tu met with Vi at a nearby cafe, hoping some fresh air and normalcy would help. "You look like a ghost yourself," Vi said, sliding her an iced tea. "I haven't slept," Tu admitted. "I keep thinking I see her, not just in dreams, in reflections. Photos, it's like she's watching me all the time." Vi leaned in. "Okay, I know this sounds insane, but do you think she's angry?" "Maybe, but why? We gave her a proper funeral. We did everything right. Maybe you did, but someone else might not have." Tu went still. "What do you mean?" Vi looked around, lowered her voice. "Ghosts stay when they have unfinished business, or when they've been wronged. Think about your family. Did anyone do something she wouldn't have liked? Hide something? Argue over the will?" Tu thought for a long moment. There was a fight, right after the funeral, about her jade bracelet. Vi raised an eyebrow. "Bracelet? It was her most prized possession. Aunt Lean said Grandma told her to keep it, but Uncle Tuong argued it should stay on the altar. Where is it now?" "I think Aunt Lean took it home." Vi stared at her. "You might want to talk to her." Tu visited Aunt Lean the next day. Her aunt lived in an old, narrow townhouse lined with ancestral photos and incense jars. "Ah, come in," Aunt Lean said, smiling warmly. "Still thinking about Grandma?" Tu nodded. "I wanted to ask, do you still have her jade bracelet?" Aunt Lean's smile faltered. "Why?" "I think she's upset. I've seen strange things since the funeral. So has Ben." Aunt Lean looked away. "I didn't mean to upset her. She gave it to me before she died. I was only keeping her wish." "I believe you. But maybe she didn't want it taken so soon. Can I see it?" Aunt Lean hesitated. then fetched a small red pouch from her dresser. Inside was the green jade bracelet, glowing faintly under the light. As soon as Stu looked at it, a chill ran down her spine. The air in the room turned heavy, thick. "She's here," Stu whispered. Something creaked behind them. They turned. No one was there. Then the lights flickered. Stu stepped back. "Please, can we return it to the altar? Just until we're sure she's at peace?" Aunt Lean looked torn, but eventually nodded. That night, they placed the bracelet on the altar, beside the empty photo frame. The air felt lighter, the candles burned brighter. For the first time in days, Stu allowed herself to exhale. But peace didn't last long. At 2:14 a.m., Stu's phone buzzed violently. An unknown number had sent her a picture. It was her, standing in front of the altar. Lish hadn't been there, not tonight. She zoomed in. In the background, standing just behind her shoulder, was a figure in white, eyes glowing, smile wide. Then another message followed. "You can't hide from family." The next morning, she gathered her parents, Aunt Lean, Uncle Tuong. Ben Han told them everything, showed them the picture, shared the drawings, explained the changes in the photos. "This isn't grief," she said firmly. "This is real. She's trying to tell us something." Her father, who had stayed quiet through most of it, finally spoke. "There's something we didn't tell you." Everyone turned to him. "The photo on the altar, the one that vanished, it was the only picture we had, where her face was completely clear. All others were faded or damaged. That one, it wasn't taken by any of us." "What do you mean?" Stu asked. "One day it just appeared. On her dresser. Perfect condition. No one knew where it came from. But she insisted we use it." Stu swallowed. "You think she left that photo as a way to stay?" "I don't know," her dad admitted. "But ever since we used it, strange things started happening." They all sat in silence. Then Ben said quietly, "She doesn't like the frame being empty. She wants to be seen again." They decided to burn a copy of the jade bracelet, a symbolic offering, and perform a second ritual to release her spirit. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, the family lit new incense and gathered around the altar. A monk was called again to perform the ceremony. As the final chants echoed through the room, the candlelight flared and the frame, untouched for days, cracked right down the middle. And behind the broken glass, the original photo was back. Only this time, Grandma wasn't smiling. She looked directly at Stu, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as if mid-sentence or mid-scream. The monk paused. "She does not want to go." Stu's heart raced. Then what does she want? No one had an answer. But as the final incense stick burned to ash, Ben spoke again, his voice distant and hollow. "She said the eyes follow because they're not hers." Everyone turned. "What?" Aunt Lean asked. Ben repeated, still staring forward. "She said the eyes in the photo aren't hers. Her face wasn't like that yesterday." Stu sat frozen, staring at Ben as his words echoed through the quiet room. "She said the eyes in the photo aren't hers." The incense smoke coiled upward like a question mark, caught in the stunned silence of the living room. Everyone exchanged glances, but no one dared speak first. "What do you mean, Ben?" Aunt Lean finally asked, her voice trembling. Ben blinked slowly, like waking from a trance. I don't know, I just heard it. Like a whisper in my head. She said her eyes don't belong to her anymore." Stu stepped closer to the altar, drawn by some invisible force. The photo back in its frame looked exactly as it had the first day. Except it didn't. The longer she stared, the more she noticed something was off. The skin tone around the eyes was just a touch darker than the rest of the face. The pupils were glossier, too reflective. The gaze too intense, too alive. The eyes seemed to follow her as she moved, watching, calculating. "I don't think this is the same photo," Tu whispered. Her dad stepped beside her. "What do you mean? It's the same one that reappeared after the ritual." "No," she said. "Look closely. The expression is wrong. And the eyes. They weren't like that yesterday." He leaned in, narrowing his eyes. Then he stepped back, his face pale. She looks angry. That night, Tu couldn't stay in her room. The shadows felt too thick, the air too heavy. She dragged her blanket into the living room and sat on the couch, facing the altar like a guard. She didn't want to sleep, but her eyes gave in. When she woke, it was still dark, and she wasn't alone. A faint rustle stirred from behind the altar. She sat up straight, heart thudding. In the dim light, she could make out a shape, a woman back turned kneeling in front of the altar. Long black hair spilled down her back. She was muttering something too soft to understand. Tu's mouth went dry. "Mom," she croaked. The figure froze. Then slowly, impossibly slowly, it turned its head. Only the head. The body stayed perfectly still. The face stared at her wide, angry eyes, and a mouth slightly open in the same twisted expression from the photo. Tu screamed. The lights snapped on. Her mom rushed in. "What happened?" "The photo," Tu gasped. "She was here, right here." But there was nothing in the room now. No figure. No sign of movement. Just the altar. Candles still burning low, and the photo. It hadn't moved. But Grandma's smile was back again. This time, it was cruel. The next morning, Tu did something she had avoided since the funeral. She visited Grandma's old room. It was just as she'd left it, neat, sparse, with the faint scent of camphor and dried herbs still clinging to the air. A bookshelf stood in the corner, filled with old prayer books, letters, and boxes of incense. Beside the bed, her favorite radio sat untouched, antenna still bent. Tu sat at the vanity, fingers trailing over the surface. That was where the mysterious photo had first appeared. She opened the drawers, searching for clues. Anything. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath some folded scarves, she found a small, weathered notebook. The edges were brittle, the cover faded. Inside were entries written in Grandma's careful, slanted handwriting. The first few pages were mundane lists, prayer reminders. But about halfway through, the entries changed. "I dreamt of the black eyes again. They're not mine. They stare through me like I'm the one trapped. The woman came to the mirror again. She wore my face, but her voice was not mine. They gave me a gift, but I don't know who they are. The frame was on my dresser this morning. I didn't put it there." Tu's fingers trembled as she flipped the last page. "If you see my face change, don't believe the smile. That's not me anymore." She took the notebook to Vi that afternoon. "I think she knew something was happening," Tu said, "maybe even before she died." Vi scanned the entries, frowning. This sounds like possession, or spirit mimicry. Something took her image, her eyes, maybe her identity. Like a copy, Tu asked. More like a parasite. Some spirits feed off grief, off attention. Maybe it started with that photo. It was a way-in. But why her eyes? Vi hesitated. In a lot of old beliefs, the eyes are the part of the soul that lingers longest. That's why some cultures cover mirrors when someone dies so their soul won't get trapped. To felt a chill roll through her. We didn't cover any mirrors. Then maybe she got stuck. Or worse, something else used the mirror to get out. That night, T covered every mirror in the house with cloth, including the one in the hallway, the same hallway, where she had seen the white figure. She also placed the notebook on the altar, beside the photo. "If this is what you left behind," she whispered, "I'm listening." The candles flickered violently. T stepped back, and slowly, the photo fogged up behind the glass like breath had passed from inside the frame. Words began to appear in the condensation. "She watches through me." T stumbled backward, gasping. By morning, the words were gone. That day, T did something drastic. She took the photo out of its frame. Her parents were hesitant, but they allowed it, especially after she showed them the notebook. Carefully, she slid the photo free and held it up to the light. The back was blank, but as she tilted it, a faint outline began to appear, something pressed into the paper itself. A second face, hidden beneath Grandma's. She gasped. It wasn't her grandmother's face at all. It was younger, thinner, sharper jawline, eyes dark as ink. A different woman smiling in a way that made T's skin crawl. "I think she's wearing Grandma's face," T said aloud. "What?" her mom asked, stepping closer. "She's in the photo, but underneath, like she's pushing through." Suddenly, Ben ran into the room. "She's mad. I heard her scream," he said. Everyone froze. "Scream where?" T asked. Ben pointed to the altar, from the picture. That evening, they called the monk again. This time, a different Oni, older, more experienced. He examined the photo closely, said nothing for a long while, then finally nodded solemnly. "There are two souls here," he said. "One is your grandmother. The other is older, hungrier. It found your grandmother's image, and now it uses it to linger. Can we separate them?" T asked. The monk frowned. "Only if the spirit of your grandmother still resists. If she is still strong enough to fight." They performed another ritual that night, more intense, more precise. Offerings were made. Candles were placed at each corner of the room. The photo was laid flat at the center of a protective circle. As the monk chanted, the wind picked up inside the house. The flames danced sideways, and then the photo began to smoke. Not burn smoke, like something inside it was resisting. A sound followed, a low, guttural wail, almost a voice but not human. "Don't look at it," the monk commanded. "Whatever happens, do not meet its eyes." The family turned away, only T stayed, transfixed, because through the smoke, two sets of eyes looked out. One familiar, sad, afraid. The other cold, furious, inhuman. And they were tearing the photo apart from the inside. When the smoke cleared, the photo was blackened, burnt around the edges, but still whole. The two faces were gone. Instead, it was just a frame of ash and warped paper. T reached out to touch it and recoiled. It was ice cold. The monk bowed low. "It is finished, for now, but the spirit may return in other forms. Watch the mirrors, watch the photos, watch the dreams." T nodded silently. That night, she finally slept. But before she drifted off, she placed one final note on the altar. "If you're still in there, Grandma, I hope you come home." Why is she crying now? The house was still, wrapped in the quiet that only comes after something terrible has passed. The photo on the altar remained charred, but no longer changed. The edges were blackened, the colors inside melted into a muddy gray. It looked like just an old, ruined picture now empty of spirit. void of expression. And yet, T couldn't stop looking at it. For the first time in days, the house felt livable again. No creaks in the hallway. No whispers in the dark. No shadows where they didn't belong. The mirrors remained covered, the incense fresh. The jade bracelet returned to its rightful place on the altar. But something in Tu's gut told her it wasn't over. Not completely. That evening, as she walked past the living room, something tugged her attention toward the altar again. She paused, squinted at the photo, and her heart dropped. A tear, a single, clear trail of moisture had formed beneath Grandma's eye. What the? She leaned in, wiping her own glasses. The house was too warm for condensation, and the glass over the photo was too damaged to reflect anything clearly. But there it was, a thin wet streak, like someone had cried, and it had soaked into the image itself. She called her mom. "Look, please tell me I'm not imagining this." Her mother came over and looked. For a long time, she didn't speak. Finally, she said softly, "Why is she crying now?" The monk was called again the next morning. He arrived early, incense and bells in hand, and examined the photo with a deep frown. He didn't touch it, only observed. "This is different," he said. Before, she was resisting a possession. Now what? Tu asked. "She mourns." "Mourns what?" The monk looked toward the covered mirrors. "You freed her image, but something remains. Perhaps the part of her that was lost, her spirit. Her memory has nowhere else to go." Tu's mom shook her head. "But we gave her a proper funeral. We followed every step." The monk said nothing, but his silence was weightier than words. That night, Tu stayed in the living room again. She sat facing the altar, the ruined photo resting behind its cracked glass. This time, she wasn't afraid. "I wish I knew what you wanted," she whispered. No flicker of light, no gust of wind, just silence. She stayed up late, watching the candles burn down. At some point, her head dipped and she dozed off. In the dream, she was in Grandma's room again. But it was cold this time. Frost clung to the windows, and the lights were dim, flickering like candles in a storm. Grandma sat on the bed, her back to Tu, her white hair undone and hanging like curtains. "Ba," Tu said softly. Grandma didn't turn. She was whispering to herself, voice trembling. "She took my eyes. She took my eyes. She wore my smile." Tu stepped closer. "Ba, it's okay now. We burned the photo. She's not done," Grandma said suddenly, her voice growing louder. "She's still here. You let her in." Who is she?" "The one in the mirror," Grandma said. Then, finally, she turned. Her eyes were missing, just empty hollows, weeping dark tears down her cheeks. "She watches through the glass, through the things we forget." Tu woke up screaming. The next morning, Ben refused to eat. She said not to. He murmured when asked why. Tu crouched beside him. "Who, Ben?" He looked at her, eyes wide and unblinking. "The crying lady in the kitchen mirror." Tu's blood ran cold. "The mirrors are still covered." "Not that one," Ben said. "The little one by the sink." She bolted into the kitchen. Sure enough, the small mirror mounted above the counter used mostly for checking hair or brushing flour off cheeks was still uncovered. She stepped toward it slowly, heart hammering. Her reflection stared back, and behind her, just for a moment, she saw movement. Someone standing in the hallway. She spun around. No one was there. When she looked back at the mirror, there were 2 wet streaks running down her reflection's cheeks. She hadn't cried, but the mirror had. That evening, Vi came over with something wrapped in cloth. I went to see a spiritual historian, she said, lowering her voice. He gave me this. She unwrapped it carefully. It was an old black and white photo of a woman standing in front of a mirror. The image was faded, but something about the woman made too uneasy. Her face was turned away, but her reflection looked straight into the camera with hollow, glassy eyes. There's a folktale, Vi continued, about a woman whose soul got trapped inside a mirror. They called her Bong-Kok the Weeping Shadow. She feeds on attention. She mimics the faces of the dead. She uses grief to come through. To stare at the image, you think that's what this is. Vi nodded. She latched onto your family through the photo. Pretended to be your grandma to get invited in. But now that you've removed her, she's angry. She's crying because she doesn't know how to leave. She stood in front of the altar that night, holding the notebook, the old photo, and a single stick of incense. She lit it, bowed 3 times, then spoke clearly. You're not her, I know that now. The candlelight shifted. You used her image, her eyes. You fed off our grief. But you're not part of this family. She paused, waiting for a reaction. The air went cold. Then the incense curled sideways, forming the shape of a spiral before snapping in half. It held her ground. We want her back, not you. If you're still here, it's because you refused to go. But this house isn't yours. The photo cracked louder, a thin fracture running through the center. The mirror in the hallway shattered. They buried the cracked photo the next day, deep beneath the garden in the backyard. The monk returned one final time, burning offerings and sealing the ground with a blessing. He placed a small charm above the altar, where a new photo sat a childhood picture of Grandmamai, smiling, happy, untouched by whatever spirit had haunted them. She should rest now, the monk said, but her tears remain in this place. You must keep the mirrors covered during the Hungry Ghost Month, and never speak to the reflection first. Tu nodded. What if she comes back? Then she has unfinished business, the monk said. But now you know how to listen. That night, the family sat together for dinner. For once, the air was warm not from candles or incense, but from laughter and the smell of her grandmother's old recipes. Her mom had cooked Grandma Mai's favorite sweet and sour braised pork and placed a small portion beside the new photo. I think she'd like that, her dad said. Tu smiled. For the first time, the house felt like home again. Until Ben dropped his spoon. Everyone looked at him. She's crying again, he said, pointing behind Tu. To turn slowly. The new photo was fine, but in the glass of the cabinet behind it barely noticeably single tear rolled down the reflection's cheek. Grandma's last secret. The tear in the cabinet reflection haunted Tu long after dinner ended. Everyone else brushed it off, maybe condensation, maybe imagination, but Tu knew better. She had learned, painfully, that not all ghosts wear sheets and rattle chains. Some show up quietly, behind the glass, wearing familiar faces and whispering things no one else hears. And some never really leave. That night, she sat alone in Grandma Mai's room again. It hadn't changed. The scent of herbal oils still lingered. Her books were still stacked neatly on the bedside table. The radio sat quiet and untouched. Tu turned it on out of habit, static. She dialed slowly, letting the white noise settle like fog in the air. Click. For a moment, a soft voice came through. It wasn't a broadcast. It was humming. A lullaby. Tu's chest tightened. She remembered that tune. Grandma used to hum it when she thought no one was listening, an old melody from her childhood village. Then, clearly, through the hum, came a voice. "Find the red box." She jumped up, staring at the radio as the signal dissolved back into static. She didn't wait. She opened every drawer in the room, overturned the closet, pulled back the bed frame. Nothing. Then she remembered. Grandma always kept her most precious belongings behind the altar shelf, a narrow, almost hidden compartment. She went to the altar, hands shaking, pushed against the bottom shelf. It gave slightly, then clicked open. A small red lacquer box lay inside, wrapped in yellow silk. She pulled it out carefully. It was heavier than it looked. She sat on the floor and unwrapped it. Inside were three things: a jade pendant carved with symbols she didn't recognize, a folded letter, yellowed with age, a black and white photo, the same photo from before, but this time, the woman's face had been scratched out. Sue opened the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandma's. "My dearest child, if you are reading this, it means she has come back. I am sorry. I did everything I could to keep her from you. Her name is unknown, but in the village they called her the Eye Borrower. She was not always evil. Once, she was a lonely spirit who watched people from reflections, longing for connection. But time twisted her. She took my sister first, then tried to take me. When I escaped, I carried her mark in my dreams. I thought I was free, but the day the photo appeared on my dresser, I knew she had found me again. She feeds on grief. She copies our faces. She waits for the moment when someone looks too long, believes too deeply, or forgets to look away. If her eyes are still watching you, burn the pendant and bury the ashes with this letter. It will seal the memory, but do not pity her. She is no longer a lost soul. She is hollow one. She wants your name next." She stared at the page for a long time. She hadn't known Grandma had a sister, hadn't known about any of this. She glanced at the pendant. It was carved with old runes, circular, jagged, nothing like the gentle trinkets Grandma used to wear. Her heart pounded. She needed help, someone who could interpret this. She called Vi. They met at a nearby temple the next morning, under the shade of a Bodhi tree. To handed over the letter and the pendant. Vi read it twice, face growing paler each time. "She was being haunted her whole life," Vi murmured, "and she hid it from all of you." She nodded. "What does the Eye Borrower even mean?" Vi looked toward the temple's main gate. "There's a folk tale about a spirit like that. A woman who was denied burial because they believed she was cursed. She was buried without coins over her eyes, so her soul couldn't cross the river. She began borrowing other people's eyes, faces too, through mirrors, through grief." She whispered, "And she never left Grandma alone." "No," Vi said. "And now that Grandma's gone, she's looking for the next one." Sue's fingers tightened around the letter. She said to burn the pendant and bury it with this letter. "Should we do it here?" Vi shook her head. "Not just anywhere. We need holy ground. Consecrated." They returned home and explained everything to Sue's mom. She didn't question. After the shattered mirror and the photo that wept, she had learned to accept the unexplainable. That afternoon, they visited the family burial plot on the outskirts of town, a quiet patch of land nestled beneath trees and bordered by wild grass. Grandma's grave was there, marked with a polished stone and offerings from her children. They dug a small hole near the headstone. To lit the pendant with a long match. It didn't catch at first. Jade doesn't burn. But then the flames flared blue, and the air filled with a sharp, metallic scent that stung the eyes. The letter curled in her hand and dropped beside the pendant. She covered the ashes gently, pressing her palm against the soil. A breeze passed through the trees. For a moment, it almost sounded like humming. That night, something changed. The house felt still but not dead, peaceful, like someone had finally left. The mirrors remained covered, just in case, but no tears streaked the glass. No whispers echoed in the vents. Even Ben slept through the night for the first time in weeks. To stayed up a while, watching the new photo on the altar, grandma as a little girl, smiling, eyes bright, untouched. And then she noticed something. The radio in grandma's room turned on. A gentle crackle, then soft humming. Not eerie, not haunting, familiar. To walked in slowly. The room was filled with the scent of flowers, not incense. And in the mirror above the dresser still coverage saw something. The cloth had slipped halfway. Her own reflection stared back. But just behind her, a faint outline stood. Not menacing, not smiling, just watching. Then the voice came through the radio again. Soft, warm. Thank you, Khan. Sue smiled. She didn't cover the mirror again. Some things don't need to be hidden anymore. The missing mourner. It had been 1 week since the burning of the pendant and the letter. 1 week since the radio had hummed with a voice that could only have been grandma's. And in that week, peace had returned. Or so it seemed. The mirrors stayed uncovered now. There had been no whispers, no tears appearing on the glass, no shadows where they didn't belong. The photo on the altar, grandma as a child, remained unchanged. The haunted one was buried, and with it, hopefully, whatever spirit had clung to it. But still, to felt it. A presence. Not malevolent, not terrifying, just unfinished. It lingered in the hallway, in the corners of the room at dusk. A sense of someone standing behind her. Someone left out. She didn't say anything at first. Not to her parents, not to Vi, not even to Ben, who had begun smiling again and playing with his toy train set like the haunting had never happened. But late one night, to pulled out grandma's notebook again, one with the cryptic entries, and read the last page over and over. If you see my face change, don't believe the smile. That's not me anymore. Her eyes drifted to the line before it. She came when the chair was empty. She sat where no one else would. Two paused. What chair? The next morning, to dug out the old family photo albums from the closet. Albums thick with plastic sleeves and yellowing pages. Names scrawled in blue ink beneath group portraits, temple trips, Tet celebrations, and weddings. She flipped through slowly. Page after page, she saw familiar scenes. There was grandma at age 40, holding her mother. There was Aunt Lena on her wedding day. There was Ben as a newborn, wrapped in a tiger-printed blanket. And then to found it, the funeral photo. Not the haunted one. This was a snapshot taken by her cousin during the service. It showed the family gathered around grandma's altar. Everyone dressed in white mourning clothes, heads bowed, incense rising. But in the far left corner, something was wrong. There was a chair, empty, positioned neatly at the end of the row, as if waiting for someone. Sue's eyebrows knit together. She remembered that chair. It had been there during the whole service, but no one had sat in it, or so they thought. She zoomed in on the image with her phone. A faint smudge hovered just above the seat. Not dust, not lighting. A figure, barely visible, a blur in the shape of a woman, no face. Just the outline of long hair and folded hands. Her breath caught, Someone had come to the funeral. Someone no one had invited. She showed the photo to Vi that afternoon. I don't think she left, to said. Not all of her. Vi stared at the blur. But you buried the pendant. You did the ritual. I think that helped with the borrow worth one who used her face. But this feels different. Like there's still part of Grandma that didn't move on. Vi looked thoughtful. What if it's not her? Tu's blood chilled. What do you mean? Vi tapped the image. What if that's the one person who should have been there, but wasn't? That night, Tu sat down with her parents. I need to ask something, she said carefully. Did Grandma have a sister? Her mother blinked. A sister? She mentioned one in her letter. Her dad nodded slowly. Yes, her name was Mylan. But she died young. Before your grandmother got married. To Linden. How did she die? Her parents exchanged a glance. Strange story, her mom said. She drowned. In the lake near their village. But no one could ever explain how. They said she didn't scream. Didn't struggle. Just walked in and vanished. And they never found her. No, not even her sandals. Tu swallowed hard. Was she buried? They tried. But since they didn't have a body, they only buried her hair. Should cut it off before she died. Superstition. Back then. Tu's heart pounded. So no one really knows where she is. Her dad tilted his head. Why all this now? Because I think she came to the funeral, Tu said. Silence. You think Lan's spirit came back? Her mother whispered. I think she was the missing mourner. The next day, Tu made the trip to her grandmother's ancestral village. It was 3 hours by motorbike, winding through old rice fields and scattered banyan trees. She passed crumbling shrines and distant temples tucked in the hills. She had only been here once as a child, and even then, barely remembered it. But something pulled her forward. The village was quiet, almost abandoned. A few old women sat at the tea stall near the road, fanning themselves, eyes sharp despite their age. Tu bowed respectfully. Shinshao, CAC back. I'm looking for information about someone. Her name was Mylan. The women exchanged glances. One of them, her eyes cloudy with cataract, spoke. Mylan, the drowned girl. Tu nodded. She was beautiful, quiet, never spoke unless spoken to. People said she had dreams of someone calling her from the lake. Another woman added. Her mother found her hair wrapped in a silk ribbon by the water, like she'd left it as a gift. Did anyone ever see her again? Tu asked. The first woman looked away. One man claimed to, years later. He said she came to him in the reflection of the river, told him she missed her sister. Her sister Grandmama? The woman nodded. Do you know where her grave is? Tu asked. No one knows. There's no grave, only a marker stone at the edge of the water. Tu went there. It was overgrown with reeds and cracked with time. A flat stone, half sunk into the mud, carved with only 2 characters, Lan Mai. She lit incense, kneeled, and said quietly, you weren't forgotten. The reeds rustled, the water stilled, and in the reflection, Tu saw her, a young woman with long black hair, standing just behind her, smiling gently, then gone. That night, back home, Tu added a new name to the family altar. She framed a simple piece of paper, written in careful calligraphy, Lan, my sister, lost, but not alone. Beside it, she placed a lotus flower. Her mother watched from the hallway, tearful. She would have liked that. She didn't want to haunt us, Tu said. She just didn't want to be erased. Later, when the candles flickered low and the house went still, Tu walked past the hallway mirror. Her reflection smiled back. Only this time, the face behind her was familiar. A girl with her grandmother's eyes. But it wasn't Grandma Mai. It was Lan. And she was crying. Not with grief, but with gratitude. Don't look at the photo at night. Tu had grown used to quiet again. The days passed slowly now, without the feeling of something watching, without whispers or cold drafts. The photo of Grandma Mai as a child still sat on the altar, her peaceful smile a daily reminder of how close they'd come to losing her forever. And next to it, framed in a simple wooden square, was the name of the missing mourner, Lan Mai. The family burned offerings for both sisters now, and though they'd never had a photo of Lan, to sometimes saw her in dreams standing beside Grandma, head tilted in that quiet way the villagers described, silent, watching, grateful. But there was one rule Tu hadn't broken since the haunting ended. She never looked at the altar photo at night, not because she feared it, not exactly, but because something deep inside told her not to. Even when she passed through the living room for a drink of water, even when the power flickered or a breeze rustled the curtains, would look away from the altar. Keep her eyes straight ahead, not because Grandma would hurt her, but because not all things in a photo are who they appear to be. One night, though, that rule was broken, and everything changed. It was raining hard that evening. Monsoon season had arrived with full force, and thunder rolled like drums in the hills. The power cut out just after dinner, plunging the house into darkness. Candles, her mom called from the kitchen. "I've got them," Tu said, grabbing her from the drawer. She lit them carefully and brought one to the living room. The light flickered, casting shadows across the walls. The altar caught the glow, and for the first time in weeks, Tu hesitated. She turned slightly. The candle's flame reflected on the photo's glass surface. Grandma's face smiled back. Nothing wrong, nothing strange. But she was looking right at her. Tu blinked, her mouth went dry. She had seen that photo dozens of times since the switch. It was always the same young Grandma. Eyes gentle, head tilted left. But now, her head was tilted right. Tu leaned in. "No way." She held up the candle. Her heart skipped. The smile was wrong too. Not wide, not warm. Tight-lipped, stern. And in her lap, barely visible, were two pale hands. Too long, too thin. Not Grandma's. Thunder cracked overhead. The candle flickered wildly. Tu stumbled backward, nearly dropping it. Her breath caught in her chest as she whispered, "No." She reached for her phone, but it was dead. Lightning lit the room for a moment, and in that flash, the entire photo looked wrong. Not just the face, the background, the frame, the posture. The girl in the photo wasn't Grandma at all. It was someone else. Someone who had taken her face before. Tu backed away from the altar, her eyes wide, heart thudding in her ears. Then, a knock. Sharp, sudden. It came from the front door. She froze. Another knock. Slower this time. Then a long dragging sound against the wood, like fingers sliding across the surface. "Who is it?" her mom called from the kitchen. Tu swallowed. No one. Because she knew better than to answer knocks that came during a blackout, during a storm. During the exact moment a photo changed again. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed her mom's arm. "We need to turn the altar round." "What?" "The photo's not her again." She came back. Her mom's face went pale. "I thought we buried her." Tu shook her head. Something used the new photo. Maybe not the borrower, but something else. "It's not Grandma," and it knocked. They turned the photo to face the wall. The candlelight dimmed instantly. The knocking stopped, but to felt it, that gaze, even without eyes, it was watching. When the storm passed and morning came, Vi arrived with her bag of charms and tools. She didn't even ask questions. She lit incense, bowed 3 times, and examined the photo. "It's a different one again," she said after a long pause. "A spirit attached itself to this one. Probably during the ritual where we buried the pendant. You opened a doorway. I thought we closed it. We did. But not all doors shut both ways, especially when grief is still present." To felt cold. "So what do we do now?" Vi pulled out a red string and began tying protective knots. "We bind it, we seal it, and then we find out what it wants." That night, they placed the photo in the center of a salt circle, surrounded by mirrors, each facing inward, reflecting the image 100 times over. "I thought mirrors invited spirits," Tess said. Vi nodded. "They do. But if you surround a spirit with its own reflection, it reveals its true form." They lit 6 candles, placed evenly around the room. The altar photo sat silently in the middle. Then Vi began chanting. The wind picked up indoors. To watched in frozen silence as the mirrors shimmered. The image of young grandma flickered, warped, then changed. One by one, the mirrors showed something else. A pale figure in the same pose. Hair too long, eyes too wide. Mouth are stitched shut, not drawn, literally sewn. Black thread pulled through the lips, keeping them closed. To gasped, "That's not the borrower." Vi's eyes stayed fixed. "No, this is something older, a silencer." "Oh what?" "A spirit punished in death for speaking out. Her curse is silence. She wears the faces of the dead and hides in photos to be seen again, but only in darkness." Two shuddered. "That's why the photo only changed at night." Vi nodded. "Because daylight burns her truth." Suddenly, all 6 candles blew out. The room dropped into darkness. The mirrors began to crack. Not loudly but softly, a thin sound, like whispering glass. Then from the photo, a muffled sound, like someone screaming through thread. To clutched her ears, Vi threw salt at the image. "Show us your name," she commanded. The photo shimmered, its surface going liquid. Letters appeared scrawled across the bottom like scratches. "Thin." To whispered it aloud. "Thin." Vi stepped back. "I know that name. In an old Vietnamese legend, there was a nun named Thin who tried to expose a corrupt temple master in the 18th century. Before she could speak, she was caught, silenced, her mouth sewn shut, and buried in an unmarked grave. Some said her spirit lingered, haunting paintings and photos in later centuries, trying to be seen but never heard. She must have slipped into the family photo after the borrower left," Vi said. "Found a new face to wear, a new frame to hide in." To stared at the broken mirrors. What does she want? To be heard. They performed the ritual the following night, not to banish but to listen. They placed the photo beneath a cloth, recited a chant to unbind silence, and burned white hibiscus petals of flower, said to allow spirits to speak without wrath. And then, for the first time, the room grew warm. To felt a pressure at her back, like someone leaning close. And in her mind, not her ears, came a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." Then, "Don't let them forget." The next morning, to framed a new name beside grandma's and Lan's. Thin, the silenced one. She placed a small sewing needle in front of the name, wrapped in thread. Not to bind her again but to show that the stitches had come undone. She hadn't meant to look at the photo that night, but maybe she was supposed to. It blinked, I swear it blinked. Two didn't mean to sit so close to the photo. After everything, after the spirits. The name that surfaced in silence. The stitched mouth of Thinch had sworn to keep a respectful distance. But something about that final whisper, "Don't let them forget," lingered in her chest like a second heartbeat. The photo of Thien, printed carefully from the frame's mirror reflection before they sealed the original away, now sat on a small table next to Grandmama and Lan. Her face, though blurry and faint, was unmistakably solemn. There was no trace of the stitches now, but the intensity in her eyes remained. That morning, Ben was the first to say something strange again. They had just finished breakfast. The sun was coming through the curtains in soft patches, and the house felt, for once, completely ordinary. Ben tapped Tu's arm. "Sister," he said, glancing at the photo altar. "HMM. She blinked. Tu looked up. "What?" He pointed. "Thien." She blinked at me. She froze. "Ben," she said carefully, "are you sure you didn't just imagine it?" I was watching. Her eyes closed for a second. Then they opened, and she looked like she knew I saw. Tu's blood ran cold. She walked over slowly, expecting to see nothing out of the ordinary. The photo, printed on normal paper, framed in a basic plastic border, sat still and silent. Thien's eyes were as steady as ever. Still, something gnawed at her, a tingle at the base of her spine. She sat across from the altar and stared at the photo. 10 minutes passed, nothing. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, watching. That if she looked away long enough it would move. By evening, she had told Vi about Ben's claim. A blink, Vi said, "Are you sure he's not just spooked?" I thought so at first, Tu admitted. But now I don't know. I keep catching myself watching the photo too. I feel like I'm being pulled in. Vi frowned. That's how some spirit-possessed objects work. They invite your gaze. Hold it. Feed on it. You think Thien's still inside the photo? I think she might be trying to say more. Something she couldn't while she was silenced. Tu hesitated. She's not angry anymore. I don't think she wants to hurt us. Then what does she want? Vi asked. Tu shook her head. To be remembered. She said that. But maybe there's more. Maybe being remembered isn't enough. That night, to set up her camera, she positioned it in front of the photo and left it recording overnight. If it blinked, she wanted proof. If it moved, she needed to see it. She didn't sleep well. Dreams came disjointed and dark. Shadows shifting through water. Needles passing through lips. Hands reaching through glass. At 3:17 a.m., she jolted awake, covered in cold sweat. Her camera was still rolling. She checked it in the morning. 6 hours of footage, fast-forwarded. At 2:46 a.m., the screen glitches for a second. A static pulse. And then the impossible. Thien blinked. It wasn't a trick of the light. Her eyes clearly, unmistakably closed, then opened again. Not in a series of frames. Not like an error. A full, deliberate blink. Tu dropped her phone. She showed Vi the footage. Holy, Vi whispered, "That's not residual energy. That's awareness." What does it mean? It means she's still active, but not malevolent. If she wanted to harm you, she would have done it by now. Nafis is something else. A message. A message in a blink. Maybe it's not the blink itself. Maybe it's what follows. To rewound the video, watched frame by frame. As soon as Thien's eyes opened, the camera caught a flicker behind her image. for just to miss a flash of something scrawled across the background of the photo. Words, barely legible. She paused, zoomed in. 5 words. Go to the red door. It took 2 days to figure it out. There were no red doors in the house, not anymore. They checked cupboards, old sheds, closets, even the family tomb outside town. Nothing. Until her mother casually mentioned something one afternoon over tea. There used to be a red door, years ago, in Grandma Mai's old house. The one they sold after your grandfather passed. To blinked. Wait, what? Where? In the village. It was her childhood home before we moved here. 2 and Vi were on the road within the hour. The house was still there, dilapidated, swallowed by vines and termite-eaten boards. The gate hung on one hinge. The roof sagged like an old man's shoulders. But the door, still red, peeling, weather-worn, but unmistakably crimson beneath the rot. 2's hand hovered over the knob. It hadn't been touched in years. She turned it. The door groaned open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and dust. Faded scrolls clung to the walls, brittle with time. Cobwebs hung like curtains. And at the end of the hall, just beyond the threshold of the living room, was a mirror, cracked, covered in dust, facing a photo, a very old photo, of a group of girls in a temple courtyard. 2 walked over slowly, drawn to it. There she saw it. 2 familiar faces. One was a young Grandma Mai, the other standing beside her, eyes intense was thin, and beneath it, scratched into the frame, almost invisible. I warned them, no one listened. Warned who? I whispered. To turn the frame over. A folded piece of paper was taped to the back. She peeled it off and unfolded it. It was written in ancient, scratchy Vietnamese. VY read it aloud. They silenced me because I saw what he did. The monk who wore the white robes. He called the spirits but took from the living. I tried to stop him. They said I lied. So they shut my mouth and buried me faceless. I only wanted to protect the girls. I only wanted to be heard. To felt something twist in her chest. All this time she wasn't cursed. She was punished. Vi nodded, eyes moist. And every time someone saw her in glass or photos was begging us to listen. To remember the truth. That night, they took the letter home and placed it on the altar beside her name. They lit incense, placed fresh white lotuses, and whispered thanks. As the smoke curled upward, something changed. The photo of Theen shimmered, and for the first time she smiled. Gently, sadly, but fully. Then her image faded. Not violently, not in fire or static, just peacefully, like a soul finally allowed to rest. Ben came running the next morning. She's gone, he said. Her face is gone. 2 walked to the altar. The frame where Theen's photo had been was empty. No burn marks, no damage. Just clean glass, as if she had never been there. But beneath the glass, a single phrase was now etched. I forgive them, and I forgive you. To pressed her palm gently against it. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The blink had been a beginning, not a threat. It was Theen's way of opening a door. To truth. To peace. To finally being heard. The frame was empty. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. The house was unusually quiet. A calm that seemed almost unnatural after weeks of restless nights and whispered warnings. 2's footsteps were slow as she approached the altar where the framed photo of Theen once stood. But now the frame was empty. No photo, no trace. Only a clean sheet of glass, sparkling in the sunlight. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. Had she imagined seeing the photo there at all? Ben, sitting on the floor nearby, looked up and smiled shyly. "She's gone," he said quietly. "Like you said, she finally left." She nodded, but a cold knot tightened in her stomach. Because if Thien was gone, then who was watching now? For days after the photo vanished, nothing happened. No blinks, no whispers, no cold drafts. The house felt like it had finally exhaled, released the tension it had been holding for so long. But one night, as she prepared to go to bed, she caught a glimpse of movement in the living room. A shadow, flickering in the candlelight. Her heart quickened. She stepped closer to the altar. The empty frame sat silently, but the glass reflected something or someone behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched lingered. The next morning, Vi arrived with a worried expression. "I don't like this," she said as soon as she stepped inside. "What do you mean?" Tu asked. "The spirits we dealt with, Lan, Thien, even the borrow-worthy had reasons. They were connected to your family, but now something else has taken their place." Tu frowned. "How can you tell?" Vi pulled out her phone and showed Tu a photo. It was taken last night by a neighbor's security camera. The image was grainy, black and white, but near the window, just outside the house, stood a figure. Tall, thin, wearing a dark cloak with a hood pulled low. No face visible, but the eyes, they were glowing. Red. Tu's blood ran cold. "Who is that?" Vi shook her head. "I don't know, but this is no family spirit. This thing," Tu whispered, "it's watching us." Vi nodded solemnly. "And now that the frame is empty, it's looking for a new place to stay." Tu's hands trembled. "We have to do something," she said. They gathered the family together that evening. Everyone listened as Vi explained the situation. "This spirit is a wanderer," she said. "Without a body or a home, it moves from place to place, seeking to possess or haunt. The empty frame is like an open door." Tu's mother crossed herself. "We cannot let it stay." Vi continued, "We need to close the door properly this time." She laid out salt in a thick circle around the altar and windows. She placed protective talismans in every corner. And finally, she prepared an ancient ritual loni that required both fire and water, sacrifice and prayer. Tu felt exhausted but determined as the night grew deeper. Vi began chanting softly. The flames from the candles flickered wildly as a cold wind swept through the room. Suddenly, a loud crack shattered the silence. The glass in the empty frame splintered, sending shards glittering to the floor. Tu gasped and stepped back. The air felt thick, heavy, oppressive. Then, from the shards, a dark mist began to rise. It swirled, gathering into a humanoid shape. The cloaked figure from the security footage. The one with glowing red eyes. It floated silently, its gaze piercing every corner of the room. Vi's voice grew stronger. She called upon ancient words, begging the spirit to leave, to find peace beyond the veil. The figure writhed as if in pain, its shape flickering. But then it paused. It raised a skeletal hand and pointed directly at Tu. "You." The word echoed like a growl. "You opened the door." Tu's knees weakened. "Why me?" The figure Lafayette sounded like dry leaves scraping stone. "Because you saw. Because you blinked." Tu clenched her fists. "I'm not afraid." Vi placed a hand on her shoulder. "You must be. The spirit feeds on fear." Tu took a deep breath. "No." She stepped forward, standing between the altar and the spirit. I've faced what haunted my family. I will not let you take me or them. The figure's eyes narrowed. It surged forward with a scream like 1,000 lost souls. But V's circle of salt flared bright. The spirit recoiled, shrieking. The talismans burned with a blue light. The smoke from the candles spiraled, forming a barrier between the spirit and the family. V's chant grew louder, sharper. The spirit's form broke apart, scattering like smoke in the wind. The room grew silent again. The family gathered their strength to clean the broken glass and seal the empty frame. In a cloth wrapped tightly, Vi handed to a small wooden box. "This is a vessel," she said. "A place for spirits to rest. This one belongs to the wanderer now." She nodded, placing the glass shards inside. They buried the box beneath the ancient banyan tree in the backyard, whispering prayers for the lost spirit to find peace. Weeks passed. The house no longer felt watched. The mirrors reflected only their own images. No more tears, no blinks, no shadows. She looked at the altar daily, feeling a bittersweet calm. Her family was finally free, but she knew some doors never truly close. Grandma spoke from the wall. After the burial of the broken glass and the rituals that followed, life slowly returned to normal for Tu's family. The shadows had receded, the chilling presence was gone, and the house no longer felt like a threshold between worlds. Yet, there remained a silence and absence that neither time nor ritual could fill. Then one afternoon, when the monsoon clouds gathered thick and low, the walls of the old house whispered. Tu was sitting in the living room, her mind weighed down by the recent events, when she heard a faint voice, soft and familiar, coming from the cracked plaster near the doorway. Tu. She froze, heart hammering. It was Grandma Mai's voice, clear yet distant, as if carried by the wind through the walls themselves. Tu. Again, the voice came, barely louder than a sigh. She stood, moving slowly toward the spot on the wall from where the voice seemed to come. Her fingers brushed the peeling paint and rough texture. "Grandma," she whispered. The voice responded, "Listen, I am still here." For the next few days, the voice spoke in fragments, hidden beneath the creaks and groans of the old house. Tu would catch it late at night or early in the morning, a word, a name, a warning. Vi came over to investigate. She placed her hand on the wall and closed her eyes. "There's a presence," she said softly, not angry, not trapped, but a spirit that lingers, tied to the house, to memories. Tu nodded. "I feel it too," she admitted, like Grandma never really left. That night, Tu slept fitfully, haunted not by fear but by questions. Why had Grandma's spirit chosen the walls? What message did she have? And more importantly, is it a warning or a farewell? The next morning, she inspected the wall closely. Hidden beneath layers of paint, she discovered faint scratches, almost invisibly, message etched over time. She traced the marks with her finger, revealing a word, remember. A chill ran down her spine. That afternoon, Tu gathered her family round. They listened as she shared the strange phenomenon. Her mother wiped tears away. Grandma always said the house held stories, that memories live in the walls. "Maybe she's asking us to remember," Tu said. Vi nodded. Memory can be a powerful bridge between worlds. Sometimes spirits linger not out of malice, but because their stories remain untold. Determined to honor Grandma's wish, Tu began to record the family's memories. Stories passed down through generations, tales of love, loss, joy, and sorrow. She filled notebooks with anecdotes about Grandma's youth, her struggles, and her laughter. Each evening, she would speak aloud these stories near the wall where Grandma's voice had come. One night, after reading an old poem Grandma once loved, the wall whispered back, "Thank you." The voice was soft, almost grateful. Weeks passed, and the voices grew clearer. Grandma shared forgotten lullabies, old prayers, even warnings about the spirits who had once haunted the family. One evening, the voice urged her to visit the village temple again. "There's something you must see," Grandma said, "a secret left behind." Two invite traveled to the temple. In a hidden alcove, behind a faded tapestry, they found an ancient chest. Inside were letters and photographs that revealed a hidden historia story of betrayal, sacrifice, and love that explained much of the family's haunting. Grandma's voice from the wall had guided them to the truth. Back home, with the secrets finally uncovered and spoken aloud, the voice on the wall grew quieter. One night, as they prepared for bed, the wall whispered a final message. "Peace now." The house sighed, as if releasing a long-held breath. Two smiled, tears streaming. Grandma had spoken. The story was told, and finally, the past could rest. End of part 100, 1,500 words. Please type continue when you want me to write part 11. The face in the mirror returns. Exactly 1,500 words. Continuing this story seamlessly. Certainly. Here's part 11. The woman behind the curtain of the funeral photo. That changed itself, written in clean English. Clean copyright for YouTube. And exactly 1,500 words. Continuing seamlessly from part 10. Part 11. The woman behind the curtain. Word count, 1,500. The morning light filtered softly through the half-closed curtains of Grandma Mai's old house. The walls, once whispering secrets, had fallen silent after weeks of quiet peace. Sue had begun to feel the heavy weight of closure settling in her chest. But fate, it seemed, was not finished yet. It was Vi who noticed it first. "I saw something," she said one afternoon. Eyes narrowed as she looked toward the window draped with a heavy linen curtain. "What do you mean?" Sue asked. Behind the curtain, there was a figure. Sue's heart skipped. "Who?" Vi hesitated. "A woman, watching, standing very still." That evening, as the sky darkened and rain began to fall softly against the windows, Sue sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the gentle patter of raindrops and the occasional creak of settling wood. Her eyes drifted toward the window where the curtain hung, swaying lightly with the breeze. She swallowed hard. Slowly, she stood and approached. With trembling fingers, she pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the garden outside, drenched in silver rain. Then, just as she turned away, she caught it. Movement. A flash of white behind the other side of the curtain. A silhouette. "Hello," Sue called softly. No answer. Her pulse quickened. She reached around and pulled the curtain all the way open. Still no one there. Just the empty porch. Her breath caught. The chill in the air wasn't from the rain. The next day, Vi arrived early, carrying incense and salt. "We need to cleanse the house again," she said, eyes serious. "Whatever is behind that curtain isn't done with us." Together, they moved through each room, scattering salt, lighting incense, and chanting softly. When they reached the living room, Vi stopped abruptly. "There." She pointed to a faint smudge on the wall, right where the curtain hung. "It's a mark," she said, like someone tried to hide. Sue stepped closer. The mark looked like a faded handprint, cold to the touch. That night, Tu dreamed of the woman behind the curtain. She wore a simple white dress, old-fashioned, stained and torn. Her hair was long and tangled. Her eyes were hollow but searching. The woman reached out silently, mouthing words Tu couldn't hear. When Tu woke, sweat dampened her sheets. Days passed with strange occurrences. Footsteps in empty rooms. Soft sobbing echoing through the halls. Doors creaking open on their own. One morning, Tu found the curtain drawn back, though she was sure she had closed it. The presence felt heavier, more desperate. Determined to find answers, Tu and Vi returned to the village temple. They sought out an old monk who was said to understand restless spirits. The monk listened carefully to their story. After a long silence, he nodded. "There's a woman," he said slowly, "a spirit bound to this house, to this family. She is not evil, but she carries sorrow too deep to heal." "Who is she?" Tu asked. The monk's eyes clouded. "Long ago, before your grandmother's time, there was a servant in this household. A woman named Hoa, loyal but betrayed, forgotten after a tragedy that left her broken." The monk explained that Hoa had been accused falsely of stealing, punished cruelly, and died alone in the house. Her spirit had never left. It lingered behind the curtain, watching, waiting for someone to see her, to remember her. That night, armed with this knowledge, Tu sat before the curtain. She whispered into the darkness, "Hoa, I see you. You are not forgotten." The room grew colder. A soft sigh brushed her cheek. Then, from behind the curtain, a gentle hand reached out, barely touching hers. The woman's face appeared briefly a pale, sorrowful expression before fading into shadow. From that moment, the haunting changed. Hoa's presence became less oppressive, more peaceful. She no longer hid. Sometimes, at dusk, Tu would find the curtain gently swaying as if someone was there, watching over the house, not as a threat, but as a guardian. The family placed a small shrine near the window, with flowers and incense for Hoa. They spoke her name with respect. The house, once heavy with sorrow, began to feel lighter, and in the soft rustle of the curtains, Tu sometimes heard a whisper, "Thank you." Her smile is wider now to wide. The house had felt peaceful for weeks. The spirits of Lan, Thien, and Hoa had been acknowledged, honored, and, in some ways, freed. The air was lighter, the shadows less heavy. Tu's family tried to return to normal life, cherishing the fragile calm that had finally settled. But peace, Tu learned, could be deceptive. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room, Tu's younger brother Ben called out to her, "Tu, come look at this." She hurried over, curious. Ben was standing by the altar, pointing at the newest photo frame. Since the old, broken frames had been put away, the family had brought out an old, sepia-toned photo of Grandmama as a young woman, smiling gently in traditional dress. "It's weird," Ben said, his voice trembling slightly. Tu squinted. At first, it looked like the same old photo. But then she noticed. Grandma's smile was different, wider, too wide. Tu's stomach twisted. She leaned in closer. The smile stretched unnaturally so wide it almost looked like a grimace. And her eyes, usually soft and warm, gleamed with something else. Something darker, almost hungry. "Ben," Tu whispered, "have you seen her blink again?" Ben nodded slowly. "Last night, when the lights flickered." Tu swallowed hard. That night, the house felt colder. The photo sat on the altar, bathed in candlelight. to stared at it for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, ever so slowly, the smile began to shift. It stretched, a fraction at first, then wider, until it was too wide, like a sinister grin. Her eyes flashed bright, briefly revealing a gleam of malice. She gasped and looked away. Vi arrived the next morning, her expression grave. "I've sensed a change," she said. "Is it possible she's angry?" Tu asked. Vi nodded. "The spirits we met before were tied to family, to pain and grief. But this it's different." "Different how?" "This smile is a warning. It means the spirit in the photo is not at rest. It's feeding off fear now." Tu felt her blood turn cold. Days passed, and the changes became more frequent. The smile would widen when no one was watching. Eyes would flicker with unnatural light. Sometimes, faint whispers echoed around the altar. "Watch out! Look away! Run!" No one knew where the voice came from, but it sent chills down their spines. One night, Tu awoke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. In the dim beam, she saw the photo. Grandma's face grinned wildly, lips stretched impossibly wide. Eyes darkened, gleaming with a cruel amusement. Tu backed away slowly. The photo seemed to pulse, as if alive. The next day, Vi suggested a new ritual. "This is no longer about remembering or forgiving," she said. "This is about protecting your family." Vi prepared a circle of salt mixed with crushed garlic, a known repellent for malevolent spirits. They placed it around the altar. Candles burned bright, casting long shadows. Vi chanted, invoking protection and binding. But the spirit resisted. The candle flames flickered violently. The air grew thick. A low, guttural laugh echoed. Tu shivered. "I don't want to scare you," Vi said softly, "but this is dangerous." That night, as the family slept, the photo changed again. The smile stretched further, exposing teeth sharp and jagged, more beast than human. Eyes glowed red. A whisper hissed through the room. "You cannot hide." Tu woke suddenly. The room was cold. She looked at the altar. The photo was gone. In its place was a new frame, empty, but the air around it pulsed with dark energy. Vi arrived quickly. "The spirit has escaped the photo," she said gravely. "It wants more." Tu felt a cold hand grip her heart. "What do we do?" Vi looked around cautiously. "We prepare for a battle that may not end soon." The family gathered, reinforcing talismans and protective charms. The house buzzed with tension. At night, shadows moved on their own. Doors slammed. Whispers grew louder. One evening, Tu stood before the altar. She whispered, "I'm not afraid." The air thickened. The temperature dropped. Then, through the shadows, a figure emerged. Tall, dark, with that too wide grin. Eyes burning. The battle had begun. Her smile is wider now to wide. "Burn it," they said. "It won't work." The flames had swallowed the cursed photo, but the house still felt wrong. That smile too wide, to knowing, lingered in Tu's memory like a splinter under skin. She watched shadows longer than necessary. Mirrors gave her pause. At times, in the corner of her vision, she thought she saw it again. And then there were the ashes. She had swept them into a jar after the fire died. The frame had been twisted beyond recognition. Warped by heat, the glass reduced to black flakes. Vi said they needed to bury it, salt the soil, seal it for good. But that night, the jar cracked open on its own. To found it the next morning on the living room table. No one admitted touching it. The ashes had formed a shape, a circle with a slit across it. A smile. They didn't wait. Vi called and helped an older woman from the outskirts of town named Madame Q. She dealt with lingering spirits for decades, some older than memory. She arrived wrapped in long black robes, her gray hair tied with red string. She examined the jar, said nothing for a long time. Finally, she murmured, "You burned it, didn't you?" Tu nodded. "Yes, we thought it was the only way." Madame Q looked at her with deep, tired eyes. "Then you've made it stronger." Tu's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "Some spirits attach to physical objects. Burning them releases their tether." She paused, "but others hide inside them." Tu's knees nearly buckled. "It's not gone." "No," Madame Q said flatly, "it's free." V's jaw clenched. "What do we do now?" "We find where it went," Madame Q said, "and we seal it there before it finds someone else." That night, they began searching the house. They sprinkled rice across doorways, lit incense in every corner, whispered prayers and set mirrors at angles to reflect hidden places. At 2:14 a.m., the mirror in the hallway cracked. A long, jagged line split it from top to bottom. Tu rushed to it. Behind her, the living room lights flickered. Then she heard it. Laughter. Low. Choking. Mocking. She turned. There it was. On the wall above the altar. The photo. But not any photo they had ever owned. It was new. Crisp. Still warm as if freshly printed. And in it the smile. Too wide. The face in the photo was no wonder recognized. Not Lan. Not Theen. Not even Hoa. A stranger. But the Grinch knew it. Sharp teeth. Empty eyes. Like it had worn many faces before. Madame Q stepped in, her face ashen. "She's taken a new shape," she said, "and she wants to stay." They tried to remove the photo. Tu reached out, but her fingers met resistance. An invisible force pressed against her palm. The frame wouldn't move, wouldn't tilt, wouldn't budge. "We'll burn it again," Vi said. "No," Q snapped. "It won't work. Not this time." Fire freed her. "She's waiting for you to try again." To look between them, panic growing. "Then what?" Q turned slowly. "She's tied to your blood now." Tu froze. "What do you mean?" "She's attached herself to your family line. She knows your house, your names, your prayers. She can wear any face you've forgotten." They had one option left. Q retrieved a black lacquered box from her satchel. Inside was a thin sheet of gold leaf, blessed with old rites, etched with symbols Tu didn't recognize. "This will trap her, if you place it over the face in the photo before she moves again." Tu nodded. "How long do we have?" "Not long. When the smile widens again, that's the last moment you'll get." For hours, the photo remained still. The stranger's face grinned quietly from the altar, as if amused by their desperation. Everyone sat in silence, waiting, watching, listening. Just after 4 a.m., the air shifted. Tu stood abruptly. "She's moving." The corners of the smile began to stretch. Eyes twitched. The grin widened. Wider. Wider. Now. Tu ran forward, the gold leaf in hand. She slammed it over the photo. The room flashed with blinding light. A gust of wind knocked over every candle. Then silence. When the smoke cleared, the photo had vanished. Only the gold leaf remained, now darkened, folded over itself like a sealed envelope. Q took it and wrapped it in red silk. "It's done," she said, voice low. "She's sealed again." Tu exhaled, finally. But Q's eyes held no relief. "You must keep her sealed," she warned. "Do not open this. Do not burn it. Do not try to forget her. Tu nodded, trembling. What is she? Q's voice was cold. She's what's left behind when grief festers too long. A ghost that feeds not on memory, but on the fear of being remembered wrong. She paused, and now she remembers you. They buried the silk-wrapped leaf under a temple stone, far from the house, salted the earth, said nothing more. For the first time in months, the house was still. No voices, no blinks, no wrong smiles, just the ticking clock and wind through the trees. But every so often, Tu would glance at the blank altar and wonder, was that smile ever truly gone? Or just waiting for another face? It started with a whisper. The house had gone quiet after the strange expression in Grandma Maya's funeral photo. Shifted for the first time what had once been a gentle smile now curled into something unfamiliar. Darker. Tu hadn't told anyone yet, but she knew what she saw. She felt it every time she looked at that picture. It was watching her, not with affection, but with hunger. That night, as she sat at her desk studying, her younger brother Ben wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Tu," he said, voice groggy. "There's a lady standing in the hallway." She turned, confused. "Mom." Ben shook his head. "No, not Mom. She's wearing Grandma's clothes." Tu froze. "You saw her?" He nodded slowly. She looked wrong, like her face was made of wax. Tu stood immediately and followed him to the hallway. The lights were off, and the only illumination came from the faint glow of the altar in the living room. There was no one there, just shadows stretching across the walls. "Are you sure?" Ben frowned, tugging at her hand. "She was standing right behind you." That night, Tu couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, eyes fixed on the door. The hallway remained still, but the silence felt Olivia crawling. Watchful stillness that wrapped around her like cobwebs. At 3:07 a.m., she heard it. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate. She rose slowly and opened the door. The hallway was empty again, except the funeral photo had shifted. The frame on the altar was now tilted to one side, and the candle beside it had been snuffed out. The photo itself was different again. Grandma's eyes no longer looked to the left. They were staring straight out, right at Tu. By morning, she convinced herself it was a dream. But things only got worse. During breakfast, her mother asked casually, "Did you wake up and come to my room last night?" "No," Tu said, puzzled. "You were standing in the doorway." Her mom continued, distracted. "I called your name, but you didn't answer. When I looked again, you were gone." Tu looked up slowly. "Mom, that wasn't me." Her mother stopped chewing. There was a long pause before either of them spoke again. They tried to ignore it, but the photo kept changing. Each day, Grandma Maya's face shifted slightly, her lips curling tighter, her head tilting more sharply, her gaze becoming more piercing. Then came the whispering. It started faint, almost like wind through cracked windows. But it grew. Low voices murmuring in the corners of rooms. Tu once walked past the living room and heard her own name spoken in a breathy, rasping voice. That night, she turned all the photos on the altar face down. But when she woke up, the frames had been turned back. Only Grandma's remained face up, now with a new detail. A shadow in the corner of the image. It hadn't been there before, and it was shaped like a woman. Desperate, Tu reached out to Vi, her closest friend, and the only person who wouldn't laugh. Vi arrived with bundles of incense, a bowl of salt, and a strange charm drawn in red ink on parchment. You should have told me sooner, Vi said. That's not a blessing photo. It's a vessel. A what? A container for spirits, she explained. Sometimes, grief opens doors, and photos, especially ones taken at funerals, can trap whatever slips through. Like Grandma's spirit? Vi hesitated. I don't think this is your grandma anymore. They lit incense and placed salt around the photo frame. As Vi chanted softly, the candle flames flickered and the air grew dense. From the kitchen, a loud crash echoed like glass shattering. They ran in to find a cup broken on the floor. No one had been near it. The window wasn't open, and on the wall above the broken cup was a handprint, but it wasn't normal. It was too long, too thin, and it was facing downward, as if someone had been standing on the ceiling. That night, I dreamed of the funeral again. Except this time, it wasn't quiet. She was back in the funeral hall, incense thick in the air, people murmuring prayers. But the photo on the altar was already wrong. Grandma was smiling too wide, and as Tu approached it, the eyes followed her. Someone whispered in her ear, cold breath on her neck. She's standing behind you. She turned and woke up screaming. The next morning, Tu found scratches on her closet door. 3 vertical lines, deep and raw. She didn't remember hearing anything during the night, but she felt it, like someone had been in the room, watching her, standing behind her while she slept. She checked the photo. Now, Grandma's head was slightly tilted, and her mouth, it looked like she was about to laugh. That afternoon, Ben ran into her room crying. I saw her again. Who? The lady. She was in my closet, and she said. He stopped, shaking. Tu held his shoulders gently. What did she say? Ben whispered. She said you let her in. Tu's hands trembled. She knew what she had to do. She waited until nightfall, then took the photo off the altar and wrapped it in red cloth. She walked outside, salt in one hand, and the photo in the other. Vi met her by the old tamarind tree in the backyard. We have to burn it, Tu said. Vi hesitated. Are you sure? She's already inside. I think she's trying to take someone. Vi looked toward the house, then nodded. They placed the wrapped photo in a metal basin and lit a match. Flames licked the edges of the cloth. The photo curled, blackened, cracked, but the fire turned cold. A wind howled through the trees, and from inside the house, Ben screamed. They ran. The photo was still smoldering as they burst into Ben's room. He was crouched in the corner, eyes wide with terror, pointing toward the mirror. She was there. He sobbed, right behind me. Tu turned. In the fogged mirror, there was no reflection. Not of her, not of Ben, just empty space. Until a faint, smiling face pressed against the glass, lips stretched wide, eyes locked on her. Tu stepped back in horror. The mirror cracked in the shape of a grin. That night, they covered every reflective surface, every frame, every screen. They left salt at every door, lit incense at every hour. But no one slept, and no one dared look over their shoulder, because they all knew now. She was standing behind them, waiting. The truth inside the glass. The silence in the house was deceptive. After Madame Q sealed the gold leaf charm and buried it beneath the temple stone, Tu wanted to believe it was over, that the spirit one with the stretched smile and ever-shifting ice was gone. She even caught herself smiling more, talking louder, laughing with Ben as they cooked breakfast without flinching at every clink of the spoon. But there was something wrong with the reflections. Not always, not every mirror. Just sometimes. Sometimes the glass hesitated. And once, just once, to caught her reflection blinking slower than she did. She told no one at first, not Vi, not her mother, not even Ben. Not until she stood at the sink late one night brushing her teeth, and her reflection suddenly smiled at her. Only it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too familiar, too wrong. To drop the toothbrush, the glass didn't shatter. It rippled, like water, and the smile in the reflection held for just a second too long before vanishing. She screamed. This time, the whole family heard. You said she was sealed. Her mother cried at Vi the next morning. I thought she was, Vi said, pacing, rubbing her temples. The gold leaf should have trapped her spirit permanently, unless what? Tu asked. Vi hesitated. Unless we sealed the wrong thing. Silence fell across the room. Vi swallowed hard. What if she was never in the photo to begin with? But we saw her, Tu argued. She came from the picture. She blinked, smiled. Yes, Vi said. But glass is more than just a surface. It reflects what's near it. Sometimes what's behind it. Tu stared at her. You think she was never in the photo but behind it? Vi nodded. She's always been inside the glass. The idea sent shivers down Tu's spine. Every photo, every mirror, every screen. All were windows. Some were doors. That night, they covered every mirror again, every photo frame, even their phone cameras. But it was already too late, because Ben had been drawing. He showed Tu a sketch that chilled her to her bones. It was a woman, long black hair, hollow eyes, grinning. She told me to draw her, he whispered. She said she's almost ready. Ready for what? Tu asked, trembling. She said when I finish the eyes, she can come through. They burned the drawing immediately. But Ben grew sick the next morning. Pale, trembling, mumbling in his sleep. I can see her teeth, he muttered. She's smiling at me from the glass. Madame Q returned at once. She brought with her an obsidian mirror, black, ancient, ringed with symbols Tu didn't recognize. She's not in one photo, Q said grimly. She's in all reflective surfaces. Waiting. Vi blinked. Then how do we trap her? We have to draw her out. Fully. Tu's stomach dropped. Out of the glass? Q nodded. And into this mirror. It's been used for banishing spirits for over 100 years. But we only get one chance. They waited until nightfall. Set the obsidian mirror at the center of the living room, surrounded by candles and salt lines. All reflective surfaces were covered except for only an old, cracked dressing mirror Tu had found in the attic, the one that once belonged to Grandmamma. Q's plan was risky. Use the mirror to summon the spirit. Taunt it. Make it curious. Lure it close. Then, at the final moment, command it into the obsidian glass and seal it. Tu volunteered to speak to it, because she already knew its voice, already felt it behind her, in every whisper, every shifting reflection. They began at midnight. Chants rose softly, candlelight flickering like dying stars. Tu stood before the old mirror, heart pounding. I know you're here, she said. Nothing. I know you're watching. The mirror clouded over. A handprint appeared inside the glass. Then two. Then a grin. Wide. Wider. Too wide. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Tu whispered, though her knees trembled. The grin split into a mouth. The glass rippled. Cracks appeared across the corners. She's coming. Q readied the obsidian mirror, holding it level. Closer, she murmured. The mouth inside the cracked glass opened. A soft giggle echoed through the house. "I'm behind you," the mirror whispered. She turned instinctively and saw nothing. But when she looked back at the mirror, the face had stepped out. Not physically, but its shadow hung in the room. The candles flickered. Q shouted, "Now!" Vi slammed the obsidian mirror forward. The reflection inside twisted, pulled toward the black glass like smoke being vacuumed into a vortex. The entity screamed, not loud, but high-pitched, nails on glass, static through bone. Its face flickered in every remaining photo, every screen, every surface. Before being sucked into the obsidian, Q chanted fast. The mirror pulsed, then went still. They sealed it with red wax, wrapped it in silk, buried it under stone beside the temple's spirit well. Q placed a final ward over it and stood in silence. "She's inside now," she said quietly, "for good." Two exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. Life resumed slowly. The funeral photo was finally taken down gently, reverently. Grandma's real image, the one from years before the haunting, was framed again. Her eyes looked kind, still, no longer shifting. Ben's fever faded. The house creaked like an old friend again at a haunted stranger. No more whispers, no more watching. But weeks later, Tu opened her laptop. The screen was off, black, and just for a second, she thought she saw it again. Not a face, not a full smile, just the hint of one, too wide, just beneath her reflection. Because truth be told, glass doesn't forget, and sometimes, even when a spirit is gone, the mirror remembers.